to welcome in our guest here, who's someone that is going to be covering, this expected Super Bowl run. All right, he is definitely going to be covering it. You guys know what it is, DoseOfDion. Let's get him welcome into the program. You guys can check him out. Link will be in the description. Man always continues to support us, so please welcome in Mr. Dion. Dion, how you doing, my man?
Hey, yo, wait, real quick. Can y'all hear me? Because I don't.
Yes, sir.
You're good. You're good.
You're good.
Sound good? Man, hey, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. I'm glad this is working. This is weird. This is super weird. Like the image is super small. I feel like I'm like squinting to see myself, but it's working, man. I'm here. We can hear it, so we're good. It's good to see y'all again, man. Happy to be here.
Yeah, no, you're good, man. I honestly won't even notice. Don't even worry about it. We'll talk some ball here. I got to ask it, Dion. I got to ask it because I love picking your brain with this stuff. Last week, I know we asked John about it. We asked Mike about it too, Micro Mike. Just your thoughts on the last preseason game and some of the takeaways from some guys that, need the game. And this is what preseason's for. I know there's a chunk of Lions fans that probably are like, I'm not watching preseason. But I think there's a lot of people like myself and like you and others and Lucas and Boone that are like, we got to watch this because these are guys that could play in some death pieces. What'd you think of a guy who needs these reps more than anybody, Hendon Hooker, and how he's going to start this week? I think that's going to be probably the biggest storyline. But some of your takeaways from how he looked last week, had a concussion, barely practiced, and he looked pretty comfortable out there, Dion.
Yeah, well, hey, first off, I absolutely love the preseason, man, because when things were, especially when things were bad, it was like we can't lose. So it's like if you win, everything's happy. If you lose, you're like, it didn't count anyways. It doesn't really matter.
Exactly.
Preseason is beautiful, man. You should learn to enjoy. Look at I use this. Look at the Patriots, for example. Okay, they don't want to watch that team in the regular season, but in the preseason, man, they are loving it. They're like, yo, this is basically our starters playing their backups. They might win some games, so enjoy the preseason. But for me, Hendon Hooker. The first game I walked away, I wasn't like as blown away as I feel like the perception was. I think it was just a lot of hype to finally see him. It was like we finally got to see Hendon Hooker. And of course, he gave us the highlight play where he ran over a couple of guys. So it was like, oh, this is the dude. But then after last week, like the biggest thing for me is I stood back and thought to myself, like, this is the number 2 quarterback, and I'm confident in that. Like, I thought for a long time it had to be that they were going to keep Sudfeld just to make sure that they had kind of like, okay, we have to have Sudfeld here because we may still go to him before we go to Hendon Hooker. It kind of felt like it's kind of how I feel like with backup tackle, for example, with like Dan Skipper and Manu, that kind of thing. But after that game, I walked away like, no, I'm confident Hendon Hooker could step in and play. Maybe you got to pull some things back, but maybe you can expand some things too because of his legs. And it's like we can simplify some stuff here. But he handled himself. He was so aware. That was the biggest thing to me. It felt a lot of awareness there. We know he takes care of the ball. That's just like his trait is like, I'm going to take care of the football, specifically passing it, not the zone read stuff. That was a mess. But passing the football, he's not going to throw that thing like into a spot where the defender can get it. So tying that along with the fact that, the quickness, the awareness, the blitz recognition, getting the ball out of his hands fast, and also just the consistency. Like whenever you watch Hendon Hooker, it feels like no matter the pocket, the ball comes out the exact same. Now, I can see in like areas where that would become a problem, or maybe he takes a sack you don't want to. It's not perfect, but his throwing motion is so consistent. It feels like you're going to get such consistent results where it's like once we dial this in and how he wants it for each spot of the field, because I thought he missed easy stuff in college, you're going to have such a consistent Hendon Hooker. So I stepped away saying this is number 2 quarterback, and we no longer need to keep Sudfeld. And I think for me, that's about as good as it gets.
Yeah, hell yeah. I'm with you there.
So long as he's better than Sudfeld, we're in a good spot. Hey, Dion, it's good seeing you today. Want to ask you this. I know you've been at a lot of training camp practices, and as well as like with these preseason games. I think one of the biggest storylines, at least right now, in my opinion, is this defensive line, this edge group. Like I feel like the people are talking about the last 5 or 6 spots on this football team, and it seems like it's coming down to the edge group and like James Houston, Mitchell Gude, Isaac Ukwu, and like Matthew Betts, like those guys. It's like Dan's trying to figure out who can play Sam, who can be the edge, like how can we work this around. What is your kind of perception on that, and like who do you think out of those 4 guys, let's say like 2 of them make the team, who are your picks on that? Because it's been an interesting thing. I think the last week, like we haven't really seen Houston, and then like Agude has been just absolutely dominating, and same with Ukwu. So it's like the tables are starting to turn here on this defensive line group. Where do you stand on that? What do you think happens Saturday and then Tuesday for cuts?
Yeah, for me, that's the most fun position. I think that might be like the most anticipated position group just to see what it looks like this next week. And that position more than any other feels like, oh, they need this week. Like everybody needs this. Maybe some guys got it. Like it felt like Matthew Betts kind of put himself in the conversation last week because week 1 we didn't really have anything. And then last week it was like, oh, he could drop into coverage. He could play different. He's playing a little off ball at the end of the game. So it felt like he threw himself into the conversation. The way that I look at it is I think Isaac Ukwu stylistically is a guy that I think the Lions may very well prefer. I just think the way that he wins makes a ton of sense opposite of Hutchinson, the skill set wise, and he's played a lot of outside linebacker to this point. The flip side, my concern there is the versatility. I don't think is like Betts, right? I don't see Ukwu dropping into coverage very often. I don't see that movement versatility there. And Matthew Betts is such a different type of player. Like he definitely wins with quickness and he likes to get outside, even though he doesn't always win there, but he wins with quickness. He wins a more finesse style game. And I think that's just different. That's what it always felt like with James Houston. James Houston was always like a wild card. You have this deck of pass rushers. You got a lot of pocket collapsers. And then you had James Houston, who was just something completely different. And it felt like there was a value in that. So for me personally, if I was betting right now, I'd say Matthew Betts makes the team. I wasn't blown away last week, but I felt like he put himself in the conversation and his versatility was the thing that stood out. And I was thinking, I'm like, if he just has another solid week, I could see him separating himself to just bring something different. Now, you said keep 2. Personally, I would also be pretty shocked if the Lions kept 2. I think there's only one guy of those 4 making it that you mentioned. Could be wrong on that. I think only one's going to make it. And I think James Houston is still in the conversation, even though it feels like, understandably so, we kind of like some may just like kind of want to forget about Houston, like, oh, okay, he's not making the team because we didn't see him and it's been really rough to this point, but he still rushes the passer well. And I think you could still look at James Houston and say, hey, that's the best pass rusher of the 4. Like you could make that case. Even week 1 wasn't that, like he was getting after everything else was rough, but getting after the quarterback alone wasn't that bad. He was solid. I think he had 2 pressures in that game. So I walk away like, if Houston gets a good amount of snaps, which I don't even know if that's going to be the case. But if he gets the opportunity, say he has 3 pressures, I don't think the Lions are trying to keep James Houston from making this team. I think they would easily say, Houston, you're still going to stick around with us. We don't want to lose you because Houston's not making it back to the practice squad, in my opinion. So I think he's still in that conversation, just needs a breakout. But I think right now, if I was betting, I'd say Matthew Betts makes it, and Ukwu's right behind him.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's definitely been a heated topic on our show between James Houston, Matthew Betts. I think we're all fans of Isaac Ukwu. There's been no Isaac Ukwu slander on here, but a guy who's also been showing out in preseason. I've been asking a lot of people about him, even outside the show, but Isaiah Williams, I think he's a lock to make this roster, in my opinion. I would be baffled if he did not make the active roster based on, if you look at outside of Khalif Raymond, Jamison Williams, and Amon-Ra St. Brown, Isaiah Williams, without a doubt, has been the most productive wide receiver so far in the preseason, and he's been making noise in camp. You look at his contract, that's a lot of money for an undrafted free agent. Just what are your takeaways from Isaiah Williams? And if he makes the team, if you think so, what do you think that translates to in the regular season?
All right, so watch this. I had this super deep thought today. I was like, man, this is deep. People are going to write a book about this. I thought if Isaiah Williams was a draft pick, there'd be no doubt he's making the team. And I wrote that down. I was like, put that on the wall somewhere. But no, I seriously though, like
that's a bar.
That's really, hey, that's what I'm talking about. That really though feels like the case. Like if Isaiah Williams was a 7th round pick, I don't think there'd be any conversation of him not making the team, right? Like with Antoine Green being a 7th round pick and being pretty productive, like our second most productive receiver in week 1, you were like, man, Antoine Green's probably making it. I felt like that. Like Antoine Green's probably the next guy up. He's probably wide receiver 5 at this point. Someone's got to take it from him. But because Isaiah Williams is undrafted, it feels like it puts him in a different conversation, but I don't think it should. I think Isaiah Williams, I thought he was a better player than some of the players that got drafted ahead of him. And Isaiah Williams, what he's done so far, like, yeah, he's basically been like Tom Kennedy productive, like from years past, but he also has a lot more upside. I feel like there's a lot more juice there in what he can do. Like, I understand he's not the body type that Peoples-Jones or Fountain is, but that position and that role is still open, and you could still keep Isaiah Williams. Like, it doesn't have to be Isaiah Williams versus Fountain and Peoples-Jones or somebody else. To your point, we have 3 locks, and after that, I don't even know. I think there's a possibility, and I want to hear your thoughts on it if you guys consider this. Do you all consider that there maybe is a possibility lines come in with 4 receivers after their final cuts? Because I think he is a lock at 4. I'll leave it there.
I don't think there's a way they can do 4 depth-wise, because once there's an injury, I understand you can keep a guy in the practice squad wide receiver-wise, but I'd rather keep a Donovan Peoples-Jones on the roster compared to a James Mitchell, or maybe even – because I would assuming you'd probably be stacking up at tight end. And I think they're going to keep 3 regardless. And I think if you're going to keep 4, James Mitchell is sticking around. And no disrespect to James Mitchell. I have much more faith in Donovan Peoples-Jones, even after bad offseason, doing his job consistently than James Mitchell. That's just where I stand.
I will say, Dion, I think I wouldn't be shocked if they kept 4, but I think they add a 5th. And I think when cuts happen around the league, I think they look around and say, all right, who can we bring in?
Hey, Bobby Trees. Bobby Trees.
Yeah, there are definitely guys around the league in different rooms that are deeper that potentially could get cut that probably are having better camps than a DPJ right now. That's my first thought.
100%.
Yeah, I mean, what do you think of that? Speaking of the wide receiver room, the DPJ stuff. I know early in the offseason, I planted my flag, Dion. I'm not going to lie to you, and I said I think he could be a very solid depth piece, as someone that can kind of fill that 200-300 yards you're looking for. And I guess maybe there is part of it where people get wrapped up in training camp and OTAs and all that stuff to kind of base how seasons are going to go. You just brought up James Houston, like he's been a big one for how he's been kind of playing. What do you make of the DPJ stuff? I know people are already talking about he's going to get cut. Where are you at? Because he does fit like physically what the Lions do need, but where are you at with it?
Yeah, well, unfortunately, I stuck my claim in James Mitchell, but that's not going to happen. So, talk down to people's Jones. No, man, you're 100% right, and I think we're on the exact same page here. He fits perfectly. It's like it makes so much sense that this guy would be wide receiver 5. And to that last question, like I think, yeah, absolutely too. Like there's someone else that's probably going to come in at some point here, but Donovan Peoples-Jones fits perfectly into that role. It just makes too much sense. But then there's been really no production there at all. And in this last game, and when you watch him, there's certain routes that he just doesn't get open on. And I think that's okay if you felt that he was more dominant in the areas that he was good. Like if it was like, oh man, but he had 2 or 3 receptions in this game. We understand he's not getting open on the comeback routes and stuff like that, but he's getting open on what he's supposed to. But because there's like no production there, it's so difficult. But I think the thing with that is when I come back to the receiver room, I go based on kind of like what you did coming into the year, just how I felt about the player, my projection coming in, because I think a lot of it may have to come down to, well, what are they thinking in practice? What are we not seeing that they get to see that they may have to base a decision like that on more so? Because really, I don't think any receiver's been productive. I mean, outside of Isaiah Williams, it's been just here's a reception. It's like like nobody's consistently productive. Caden Davis was like our most productive other receiver, and feels like he's in a good spot when it comes to practice. But then you get to the preseason, and he just doesn't feel like he's even there outside of the big plays. So, yeah, absolutely. So for me, if I was betting right now, I think Peoples-Jones makes it as well as wide receiver 5. That's my next up. I'm still betting on the fact that I think that player fits too well. And I think that he has a role in this offense. And he also maybe they're just trying to do things they're just trying to see what fully is there. But like, it's clear, like there's certain routes you don't run with this guy. There's certain packages you don't put him on the field. But I think that's perfectly fine within this offense. It's just not flashy whatsoever.